Hello, I'm Radagast, Global Mission to Peace TV, Mystic View, number 36. The new code, natural homeostasis restoration. That's the new code. And part of this is going to be about holistic health. Part of the new code is that the current health systems we're in and the control systems that run them are very, let's say, they kind of own words like healing and curing. Making claims that anything heals or cures something kind of puts you in the legal hot seat. You get caught up in that nice little web that the legal system has woven all around us. And so there are a number of old ways and some very new ways, that are producing some very good results with restoring natural homeostasis. Okay. Now homeostasis is actually the balance of your body. Homeostasis kind of works when one side, it's kind of the balance of yin and yang, really. If you put something cool on a hot surface, the cool will pick up the heat, or there's always a desire to exchange and balance out where the two surfaces that come into contact with each other will try and be the same temperature. Same thing with water volumes. You put water on one side. If water has access to that other side, it will equal out. That's homeostasis. It's not just gravity. And gravity is not quite completely understood because gravity is part of homeostasis and part of implosive energy. But we're not gonna take it there. And now, first of all, I'd like to just take a quick moment. Shelley has just gotten back from. By the way, hello, Shelley.
Hello everyone. So nice to be back with everybody.
My co-host, yeah, we host the show together. It's not my co-host, I'm her co-host too. and she just got back from Hawaii, and it wasn't, sure it was pleasurable, but it wasn't a pleasure trip. It was to go get her doctorate in natural medicine, correct?
Yeah, how fun is that? And especially to follow up with this mystic view being on homeostasis and the code, especially because that's a little bit like telling a secret, revealing a secret when we talk about a code. The ancient, not even ancient, the Greek homeo meant similar, and stasis is stable. So that's really what we're creating, is a stable equilibrium, just as you were describing.
And even when we go back to some of the luminaries and what Western medicine, the Hippocratic Oath, Hippocrates. Hippocrates was a big believer in massage because it's really difficult when you go in and you happen to have a stiff muscle. The answer isn't to give it some opioid to you, although that's one way of addressing it. His way was, it needs some manipulation to restore the tissue. Because what happens often with stiff muscles, some kind of contraction or overuse, and the muscle gets hard, and it makes it hard for the muscle to hydrate properly again. That hardness kind of, go ahead, look like you were saying.
No, I think that's really important what you're describing there, is because so often this comes from fear, whether you're aware of it, whether it's just a thought, with that tension and that restriction. Everybody knows about the stress that's created with that type of tension, and really what we want to do is release that as a miasma, or the miasma, which has been permeating our current paradigm. You're right. It's that fear-induced separation, or fear caused because of separation.
Now, miasms, or the miasma, and everybody, the miasma is often used in other ways. It has a correlation, but miasm is particularly actually a hard term in homeopathic treatment. That basically almost all illnesses, if they have other than all illnesses kind of have a root in a miasm. Now, do you want to
Yes.
expand on miasm and maybe one or two of them, and it may be some kind of illnesses that might stem from them? Like maybe like a syphilitic miasm might predispose somebody to like maybe urinary tract infections.
Well, you know what? I mean, the Greek, again, we go back to the Greek term, and that was talking about a harmful or noxious atmosphere, really. And so that's where it came from. And to suggest that it has this influence on the human body that's going to produce illness. So there's a general weakness or predisposition. It can even be a social predisposition or a genetic kind of predisposition. But that's why it was considered like a noxious emanation. They even called it an evil humor. And in fact, there's just so much to say about that. But there were some categories of diseases that definitely followed that. But most important for our discussion, I think, was that it was a contagious power that seemed to have an independent kind of life of its own. And it was that subtle energy, we'll call it, that wasn't really identifiable. It was just like an atmospheric influence that you really couldn't put your finger on, but you were very susceptible, and it was very contagious. So those sorts of things had cycles, though. I guess that's what's important about it. The miasmatic diseases were, something that would have a cycle. So it would have maybe do we want to get into this? Like it would be a skin lesion, and there'd be a latent period, and then it would manifest symptoms. So it's a little bit like our social, even our political constructs of today's world.
Well, I know in my reading of miasms, largely from the books, I think it was Flower Essences of Vibrational Healing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And they kind of categorized two different kinds of miasms. One were environmental miasms, like petrochemical and radiation miasm, or two that I can call off the top of my head.
Mm-hmm.
There was also inherited miasms. And the syphilitic miasm seems to be an inherited miasm, and it would really be inherited in those kind of cultures that probably more European cultures than, let's say, African or Aboriginal cultures, where syphilis wasn't something that was rampant within the shared gene pool.
Well, a little bit later, now you went back a little bit further in history, but more recently, it was seen even as wrong thinking. So the Sora was the wrong thinking, the psychosis was like wrong wishing, and the syphilis you're referring to was considered an act of wrongdoing, which we can pretty much reflect on and see that was really the morale, though, of kind of the middle or upper middle class. Is where that came from. And that's when the healer or the practitioner actually became considered the healer, which would be to liberate humanity from evil in that regard. That's how it was looked upon.
Well,
back in the day.
People like, there was a couple of people, Graham Hancock, who's often talking about the kind of the cataclysm that created the sinking of Atlantis or the floods that get identified with that, basically speaks of a kind of a worldwide psychic trauma at the genetic level. And I think the Sora miasm might have some connection with that.
Mm-hmm. I think you're on the right track.
And so now humors. Now the interesting thing, I mean, once upon a time, and now, I mean, it got poo-pooed once they started getting real scientific about it. And part of that is actually part of the Cartesian, when Rene Descartes said, I think, therefore I am, and everything got kind of mechanistic. Prior to that medicine, including the Galen and Hippocrates, the people who we consider the fathers of modern medicine, they were much more holistic. Like I said, Hippocrates realized that you have to restore tissue, restoration, here we go, You have to restore tissue back to its pliant state when it's all gnarly. And part of that manipulation allows some of the extracellular. It allows the muscle to rehydrate. The difference is almost like between a dry sponge and a moist sponge. A dry sponge is very brittle, and you can imagine neurons going through that kind of material would be very unpleasant for them. And then a moist sponge, and I'm not talking about a dripping sponge, a nice moist sponge, and it's pliant, you can twist it, you can do all kinds of things, and you can imagine nerves in that kind of tissue would be quite happy and not reporting pain.
Think yoga. Think yoga not only just from that perspective, but also yoga as inclusive of consciousness. And really now we're talking the kind of a top-down model. And even from there, the ancients would always refer back to food. Mm-hmm. There was always a remedy in what you could eat. And that was true whether it was coming from the Ayurvedic tradition or the traditional Chinese tradition.
I feel that in my own, I've been exposed to a lot as somebody in the healing arts. I've been exposed to and studied myself a wide range of modalities. And for me, I think the pinnacle of them all, as far as an organized system, is Ayurveda. Mm-hmm. Ayurveda takes into account the chakras. So it means now the Chinese do, through a meridian system, they are understanding some form of our subtle anatomy. But it is in Ayurveda that the subtle anatomy and the consciousness that is part of it and our kind of multidimensional existence is actually understood and addressed. And their breakdown of 3 basic body types or combinations of what they call the doshas, and the foods that balance a dosha, the qualities of the foods, like, in other words, like cooling foods, where if somebody who's a fire or a pitta dosha and they're running a little hot, they might want to eat cooling foods. Where if somebody's running a little sluggishly, they might want to eat a heating food. And they have it really broken down. I think in Healthy Mind, Healthy Body by Deepak Chopra, he has some of the best charts you'll ever see on food, all kinds of food, and whether they balance, aggravate, or reduce certain pitta, kapha, or vata energies. So big props to Ayurvedic. And of course, with any of these systems, it's really about the mastery of it. It's really kind of hard just to open a school and think that because students pass their tests, that they come out the other end giving you what that art promises. I'm quite sure they can answer all the questions, but as a licensed massage therapist, I know people who pass the test, and I don't think they belong in the field, actually. They earn the right because of the criteria, but as somebody who sees it as an art, and knowing that what it can achieve and what it won't achieve if it's not understood properly, I see that also, in acupuncture. We have these great acupuncture masters that come over from China, but they don't have the certification and they can't practice in the United States. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So this is where we lose. This is something like Joseph Farrell was brought up about with the certification process, where Einstein could not teach physics unless he was certified. Darwin couldn't teach biology if he wasn't certified. This shows the absurdity of the current educational system, in my opinion.
Right. Well, coming back to the Ayurvedic kind of tradition also, what was included was the meditation as a return to the homeostasis of Prakriti, which was like your original state of perfect health, whereas there was other that was environmentally influenced. So you can take your meditation and influence your environment, whether it was the subtle worlds of your environment that's impacting you and maybe causing stress or whatever, or any other form of environment, whether it's your food or anything else that you're doing. But through meditation, we could then mirror those unique qualities. You know, every person, it was just like the fingerprint or the DNA. It's entirely unique to every individual on the planet. This is where I think the allopathic approach fails. It's wonderful for emergency medicine, but it likes to get many symptoms and then kind of stuff them in a box, and then if you match a few of those symptoms, then you're labeled as, okay, so you've got Parkinson's, or you've got this, you've got that. It really is missing the mark as far as being able to identify and help a person return to their unique homeostasis. And that can be achieved through meditation. That was something else that the Ayurveda practitioner understood, and that's also what yoga came from.
Yes. Well, when you realize that the natural state of the body is health, that is our natural resting state, health. And I mean, when you take into consideration that sometimes people die of shock. Okay, no, and it's not shock necessarily even to an organ system per se. The shock, the trauma to the energetic system of the body gets so overloaded that the body can't communicate and run its systems properly, and the spirit leaves, and you end up with a dead person. And so this goes to show us how trauma cannot be underestimated, because when we, the dying of shock is dying of trauma. And go ahead.
Keep in mind that we're electromagnetic beings, and even if you consider the term ohm is a measurement of resistance, right? So it's not just a free-for-all, a little bit of this is good, so more is better. There has to be resistance. But even if we're ohming, toning, or chanting ohm, what that still does is provide resistance. So through each of the chakras, as we are chanting or ohming or meditating, that is where the Kundalini energy rising becomes so critical, that you have that very specific resistance whereby it allows the correct impact to open that pineal gland. So you don't overload it or fail to get all the way there, fail to make that complete rise. But we know that from electricity. It's a unit of measurement to describe resistance of electricity. And light, the magnetism, the love. I mean, we need both of those things, but in specific measurement. Balance, homeostasis, that's what we need. We need it in balance. We need it to be maintained in homeostasis. And that's the code, and that's where the code of bliss is so critical, and compassion, because those form that very specific energy that is required. That's where we're not overloaded and we're not, lacking. That's the perfect measurement. And it's shareable with all DNA.
Yes. Those are kind of like the three real words, compassion as a state of being, bliss that comes from that, and also from shareable thoughts, the bliss of sharing. To me, one of the most powerful examples of that was when Mary Beth went to Standing Rock.
Yeah.
And so here she was staying in a tent with no electricity. The only electricity they had was from solar panels within the cooking tents. Porta potties, washing your hair or other hygiene was, manageable, but, it wasn't like you got up and went to your sink in the bathroom. And all meals were eaten in common. So here's somebody who comes, I've been to her home. She has a lovely home with lovely family. And despite what we might from the outside go, that's pretty hard living, she was actually feeling some pain, or like she was going to miss the life that she experienced, and largely what it was the bliss of sharing. That is, as much as this, because yes, she has great sharing with her husband and her family, but here she's with hundreds and thousands of people where this bliss sharing was occurring, these shareable thoughts. And that I mean, and the interesting about shareable thoughts is the more people that share, the greater the impact on our energy field. And she knew that even if she was going back to a completely loving family, people who adore her and need her, she was not going to be in that field of so many shareable thoughts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so true. Well, it brings up another principle, really, which, again, if we refer back to yoga, it would be hatha, the sun, and the moon, really is striving to create that balance of opposing parts, right? It's not to cast off something and say that's bad, that's wrong, and push it away. It's to find that balance. How does this serve, and where do we find strength from support and challenge, not to cast them off? And so that blissful stillness, combined with some joyful movement that she was experiencing, is life. That is life. Mm-hmm. And for her to have gone into that, shared it with the whole world, I mean, we're creating a tipping point. We keep talking about the tipping point or the 100th monkey, but the more we can share it, that frequency is like an entrainment where our joy and bliss is shared, and it's picked up just like the entrainment of grandfather clocks or tuning forks or anything else. Mm-hmm. And so we're lifting our own electromagnetic light and fields, but also helping to lift the entire planet.
Yeah, well, it seems as though shareable thoughts kind of coalesce into a vortex. Mm-hmm. And that vortex produces its own energy, which is an implosive energy. And so that's the other thing, is not only do you have this sweetness of shared thoughts, but you get energized from it. You are fed. You are fed by the shared bliss, and it's not just an emotional feeding; it's an actual energetic plug-in, extra juice kind of feeding.
I love that you brought that up, because really that can be measured as within the sacred geometry. That is the geometry of the Holy Grail, mm-hmm. what you just described there. Yes. So for anybody that likes scientific proof or evidence of what bliss is, or sacred space, that can be measured by the golden mean. That's actual geometry. And geometry, shape, form, it's information. It's the form has the information in it. And, well, that's basically what Anu was, right? Anu, the shape or the heart of the sun, is the same shape that carries that potential for bliss and compassion to be shared fractally and eternally and perpetually. It's who we are. We've been derailed. The code here is compassion and bliss will access your sacred geometry to activate perpetually and help us to, just return to who we really are. That is who we really are. Yes. Love and light.
And so when we speak about the new code, in many ways, what we're trying to do, part of what I am trying to do is we're going to be experiencing new modalities that can really bring you back to your natural homeostasis and restore it. And we don't, if we want to be able to glow about some of these different things that can do this, we have to refrain from saying this modality or this machine or whatever can heal cancer. Okay? It can cure cancer. It can cure diabetes. It can, you have to realize these are words that are considered almost like intellectual property by certain people. Mm-hmm. And so, but we when we do discover good things, we want to spread the word. What I'm trying to introduce is like a way it says, oh, if you heard about this, it's really good at restoring natural homeostasis. Mm-hmm. And this would be the code that it doesn't matter whether you have fibromyalgia, cancer, diabetes, whatever, they're all they're all not natural. They're all not part of homeostasis. And that to get well again, or to be restored to natural homeostasis, means it will address anything. So you don't have to start naming things.
Right.
You really don't. I mean, anything that's, especially some of the new technologies that are coming out, they will just kind of restore you to health. So whatever your disease is or condition is, you can leave the names out, because they're just the parts that don't fit into your natural state of health. And actually naming them is probably will give them a little bit of a psychological fixation. It's just best to know, you know what? I am not at my optimal health, and I want to return to it. And as I return to my homeostasis, whatever these things are that are bugging me, whatever their names are, they will go away. They cannot live in this field.
Right, and we can birth new light as we return to homeostasis. When we bring those things together, a negative and a positive, when you find the benefit of what your negative thing has been, and you vice versa, you're literally birthing new light. Mm-hmm. And that's what we are becoming, is lighter and lighter.
Right. Yeah. So I'm just trying to find, like, almost like create a new form of language that doesn't have ownership, so that in the future, like, maybe we're going to do reports on certain things, and we would like people to know how brilliant it is. And maybe they have people who are suffering from a really bad homeostasis. And without naming them, we're going to say, well, if you do this or go here or do that, you can really, it's been known to restore natural homeostasis. And that way, it doesn't, does it fix it? It restores natural homeostasis, like, end of story. Just bring it, get restored. Who cares about the name? And this way here, we don't create buzzwords and we go, oh, did you hear somebody's claiming they can do this? They can heal X. They can cure Y. I mean, really, we live in a really crazy system right now. And so one of the ways to kind of get past that AI, that artificial intelligence, is to be creative. So you create.
Yeah, part of the wisdom has always been to keep it simple. When we dive into all the complexities, now we've kind of lost the essence.
Yeah.
It's really, really simple. Just balance. But there's many treasures and pearls to be gained by doing the journey. Mm-hmm. It's not just to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
I mean, I guess we can, I'll just talk about, since it's no longer around because it was smashed, or at least it's no longer around that we know of, is the Rife technology. Yeah. And, as far as, the real thing. Again, there's lots of little things that are called Rife devices. The fact that they can be sold on the internet lets you know that, I've said this before, lets you know that they must not be effective, because if they were, they wouldn't be allowed to be sold.
Well, that's true, but let's keep in mind, really, what it comes down to is something that I think it was Tesla said. Who said everything is vibration, everything is frequency.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's really what Rife had discovered, was the specific frequency for each remedy, for each, and what it was is like the white noise. It's just the equal and opposite of what you're dealing with.
Yeah.
So it's pretty natural for us to step into that space, sacred space of wellness.
Yeah, he was able to, I guess, through a certain kind of microscope that used certain kind of lasers, to identify. It's almost like each pathogen has a frequency like a glass. So, I mean, so the note that you would need to shatter a glass like an opera singer will depend on the size of the glass. So you would, it's a specific frequency, and he was able to identify what the frequencies these things were at, and if they were exposed to that same frequency at a certain amplitude for a certain period of time, just like the glass, bang. And so that's really what the Rife technology did. And of course, it had to go through a certain tube that had certain noble gases that allow a certain coherence of certain biological coherence to happen to these frequencies that could just be a frequency. There needs to be a certain geometry.
The biological coherence forming the sacred geometry. I think that's it right there.
Yeah. So anyway, but there are things on the horizon, and maybe even the day has dawned on them, that will kind of pick up where that left off. But there's a lot, and there's people around it, and almost anybody who's ill has gone to a doctor and has been given a name of something. And I'm just trying to say, as these things roll out, let's not be so attached to the names, because if we say, well, such and such a process or device will restore natural homeostasis, that's kind of like your little buzzword that lets you know that you don't need to ask, does it do this, does it do this, does it do this? It restores natural homeostasis. It makes you...
Right. I think you're talking again about fear, because if we can just let it go, that's a release of the fear.
But I'm talking about...
I think needing to name it, needing to hang on to a name or a label is a little bit fear-inducing.
But I'm also talking, I guess, about the strategy of, we have what I call the legal web and the spiders waiting to pounce if you use, if you utter certain things. So, and they enable us to be able to transmit information without jangling the spider web.
Yes.
We need a new code.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to see them regulate bliss. No, I don't want to see them regulate bliss. They're going to try. I'm going to cancel that.
Watch the news. They're regulating bliss.
Yeah. They're doing everything to derail us from rediscovering how to, call bliss up. But it comes with compassion naturally.
And of course, the last video that released, even though it was number 33, but we can't, because of vacations, things got kind of released in a reverse manner, was Bliss Villages. And of course, in this case, what we're talking about is kind of bioarchitecture and a structuring of community in a way that just the houses you live in and the way you live is part of your health program, because it builds bliss and coherence, and the dis-ease cannot thrive in coherence. Dis-ease is about not being at ease, not being at bliss, and it helps you to come back into balance with the planet, balance with your neighbors, balance with yourself, balance with the creator. I mean, and so this is really we're kind of tying a little bit on our last show of Bliss Villages, and the understanding that bliss is part of health. And if you don't experience lots of bliss, somewhere there's an imbalance. You might go, well, I've been to the doctor, I've had blood workups, whatever. It doesn't mean it's in your body. One of the parts of Value Veda, and actually one of the operating facts of acupuncture, was you went to a doctor to keep you well. You didn't go to your doctor when you were ill. You went to your doctor regularly so they could read your energy and realize if this energy pattern persisted, it would result in illness. So correct the energy pattern before the illness manifests.
Precisely. That's exactly right. So we can do that through many means: meditation, massage, eating food, living in an environment that's conducive to supporting life, as opposed to all these metal boxes with harmful angles and destructive materials that do not feed life, do not support life, Again, like you said, it's a reflection of the environment. The known environment we can see, but also those unknown, unseen, subtle worlds.
Well, it's really interesting how, the marketing and labeling of things. Like, I would like to say you should eat only organic produce, but it's so sad that we have to clarify it with organic, which is now a label, and of course in the United States, USDA, so it's it's government. Okay, so that right away should be something's wrong here. Where basically organic produce is nothing more than how things were grown for thousands of years.
Right. That should be the term
Traditional
natural.
growing.
Mm-hmm.
And then came the fertilizers, and I'm talking about, you know, the things that are white powder in a bag, something, you know, or Miracle Grow, which is purple powder or blue powder in a bag. that isn't natural. And it's actually, in many ways, it's kind of like, cocaine, where, you know, something, you know, you're kind of sort of like, you know, this is how you feel. That's how depleted soil is.
Yeah. Good point.
You know, but how healthy is that state? Sure, you're alert. Sure, you perform. But, you know, when you there was a Purdue study, and I think it was in the late 80s, early 90s, comparing conventional, that means fertilized, spinach with traditional, or now called organic spinach. Now, everybody kind of sees spinach as a source of iron. Okay, well, conventionally grown spinach, well, let's say the organic spinach had 30 times more iron.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, but that 30 times is why spinach got identified with iron. That 30 times less of conventional goes to show you that it looks like spinach, might taste like spinach, but it's not why you would eat spinach. Because, I mean, 30 times less iron means no real iron. And so this is why, if food's going to be able to be our medicine, it has to have the potency that it's intended to be. I mean, even with herbal, they all talk about potency. Even allopathic medicine, they give you the dosages. Well, if you're going to eat your spinach and you want it for a source of iron, it better have the dosage in it, or else it's kind of fake.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, part of getting back to things and to make food our medicine is we have to have real food, and that means that it's fed properly and treated like food and not a product.
That's so good. Well,
I think, do you have any final words? Because I feel that I've covered this.
yeah, I just like that it's registered on all levels and scales of life. You know, I mean, we get it. We intuitively know what's good for us. And I think it's more important that we start tuning back into our own authority, because we know we've just abandoned our personal authority to run off to somebody called doctor, or run off to somebody called, you know, scientist or something like that. Really, it comes down again to acknowledging your own God spark, if I can use that word. You know, your own creative essence knows the truth. You know what's good for you. And if you just start practicing listening, it's like your voice of conscience. You know, if you ignore it, it gets quiet and eventually it goes away. If you listen to it, it becomes very, very strong. So I just encourage everybody to listen to their own God spark and follow that. And I think that's the code breaker right there.
Yes.
Straight into bliss, compassion, health.
Well, we are a fractal of that macro God. And if we can't perform on this planet in our intended way, unless we realize that we're an extension. So it's like somebody must say, "Oh, it sounds blasphemous." No, we won't get that. We can't be worked through unless we realize it, because it's not somebody's trying to work through us. We actually have a purpose, and to understand that connection is to know your own unique purpose. It's not like you have an instruction booklet. It's not like you're getting orders. You work up to your purpose on this planet. And then once you know your purpose, you can perform your purpose instead of just, like, you know, staggering around because you don't know who you are. And who you are is right in your heart. And you need to get into it. And to hear your heart, it helps. You need to be coherent. You need some minimal bliss. I mean, you can hear your heart in pain, but you hear it a lot better in bliss.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Well, and this is the phase conjugate that Dan Winter speaks about on some of our other mystic views, right? The golden ratio is a negentropic charge collapse. And that results from activating your God spark. You guys could all be wicked, brilliant scientists and not even know it. All you have to do is listen to that intuitive voice within. We got this.
We got this.
We got this, people.
Well, Shelley, thank you. Why don't you say goodbye to the people first?
Yeah. Okay. I'll just say that I look forward to our next time. I'm happy to be back. Thank you.
Yes. Yes, we will see you next time. God bless you all. And remember that we are God's sparks. Thank you.